Good morning. Good morning and welcome to First Parish in Concord on a beautiful November day. Glad each of you is here this morning. I want to especially welcome the folks who have joined us here in the sanctuary. You don't know how much good it does for you to actually be physically with us this morning. It does so much good for the staff and the choir, all of us who are working really hard to just hold this place together through a terrible pandemic. So your presence is special to me, and I thank you for being here. I want to welcome folks who are watching on Zoom or later on YouTube. I'd like to encourage you to come to church too when you can. It is really important that we gather as we can, as we feel safe to do so. Congregation requires some congregating, and I want to invite you back to the building as soon as you can. We are blessed by Jan Power's presence today on Zoom. She is our Zoom host. Thank you, Jan, for taking care of folks in the chat and on the live feed. We have accessibility here at First Parish. There are listening assist headphones in the back. If you'd like those, they just help you hear better. They work great. The ushers can help you with those. There's an elevator right here through this door. If you need to use it, it gets to all levels of the church, and all of the restrooms have accessible stalls. We are glad that you are here this morning. We are grateful to all of you for taking care of this community. To keep us all safer, masks must be worn inside the building. Also, social distance, please. Our worship leaders, choir, and teachers are all vaccinated. We strongly encourage vaccination for everyone who is medically able, as this is how we can care for ourselves and one another. To sing or not sing is your choice. The choir will sing one anthem, and the congregation will sing the closing hymn. We are keeping the windows open to improve ventilation, so if you're a little chilly, just bundle up, wear your hat and gloves, I don't care, or sit in this center section where it's a little bit warmer. We would like to remind you to stay at home if you are not feeling well, even if you think it is just a cold. If you or your family or a family member has tested positive for COVID, please call or email a member of the church staff. We will keep this information confidential, and if there has been a COVID exposure at church, we will let the congregation know. Together, we covenant to reduce the risk of COVID by each doing our part. Again, welcome to church this morning. Our call to worship this morning are words by my colleague, Barbara Wells. She says, "O spinner, weaver of our lives, your loom is love. May we who gather here be empowered by that love to weave new patterns of truth and justice into a web of life that is strong, beautiful, and everlasting." Let us worship together.
When we gather in times of memory, such as memorial services, we often recite these words. We remember them in the rising of the sun and in its going down. We remember them in the turning of the seasons. We remember them. Today, we light our chalice in memory of all of our ancestors, those who we have lost recently, those of blessed memory from generations ago, and those who inspire us, though not related to us. And so we light our chalice as we remember them. I invite you to join in the chalice lighting response. The words are in your order of service and on a slide at home. O flame of our faith, open our hearts and fill our bodies and souls with persistent strength. Enliven our spirits and engage us deeply in this life of ours, this sacred, essential moment now. Let's settle in with some centering music. Our responsive reading in the back of your gray hymnal, number 646, or on a slide at home, it's number 646, The Larger Circle by Wendell Berry. I will recite the Roman type and invite you to read the italicized. We clasp the hands of those that go before us,
and the hands of those who come after us,
we enter the little circle of each other's arms,
and the larger circle of lovers whose hands are joined in a dance,
and the larger circle of all creatures,
passing in and out of life, who move also in a dance,
to a music so subtle and vast that no one hears it,
except in fragments.
Our second reading this morning is a poem by Birago Diop. And pay attention to the words because you'll get to hear them again after the sermon as the choir sings a version of this poem. This is Birago Diop's poem, Breaths. Listen more often to things than to beings. Hear the fire's voice. Hear the voice of water. In the wind, hear the sobbing of the trees. It is our forefathers breathing. The dead are not gone forever. They are in the paling shadows. They are in the darkening shadows. The dead are not beneath the ground. They are in the rustling trees, in the murmuring wood, in the flowing water, in the still water, in the lonely place, in the crowd. The dead are not dead. Listen more often to things rather than beings. Hear the fire's voice. Hear the voice of water. In the wind, hear the sobbing of the trees. It is the breathing of our forefathers, who are not gone, not beneath the ground, not dead. The dead are not gone forever. They are in the woman's breast, a child's crying, a glowing ember. The dead are not beneath the earth. They are in the flickering fire, in the weeping plant, the groaning rock, the wooded place, the home. The dead are not dead. Listen more often to things rather than beings. Hear the fire's voice. Hear the voice of water. In the wind, hear the sobbing of the trees. It is the breathing of our forefathers. Growing up, I knew my grandparents had first names, but I never used them, nor did any of their grandchildren. We knew our maternal grandparents were Howard and June. Our paternal grandparents were Lauren and Mildred, though Lauren had died before I had been born. We knew our grandparents had first names, but never used them. To us, they were Grandma and Grandpa Lyman and Grandma and Grandpa Dana. Just as we would never have called our parents by their first names, Neil and Ruth, that would have been very strange. We reserved an even greater respect for our grandparents, and so it continues with my family today. Each time I visit family, I have to get used to having my nieces and nephews all call me Uncle Howard. They do it without fail, and my siblings refer to me as Brother Howard, which is a little odd too. And their children all call each other Cousin So-and-so. Titles are important in my family. They denote respect. They show where each of us fits in our family tree. And in the case of my family, there is something distinctly working class about this level of respect. Because if you don't have much money, respect is even more important. It is also important if your experience of our society is such that little respect is automatically given. Yolanda Pierce, who's the dean of Howard University School of Divinity, writes, "How and why you call someone's name has always mattered deeply to Black people. Growing up, I dared not call any adults I knew by their first name alone. Before the weighty first names of the older Black women from my church and neighborhood, Sadie, Ernestine, Mildred, Frances, Vivian, Beulah, Johnny May, Hattie, Virginia, or Etta, always came an honorific title. For people at church, we used sister, brother, deacon, elder, mother, or pastor. At home, we used auntie, uncle, Mr., and Mrs. These titles were rooted not in formality, but in intimacy. They were not about artifice, but about respect, which we were taught was the basis of the relationship between children and adults. They were also about gaining dignity in a country that historically afforded very little to African Americans. These titles were rooted not in formality, but in intimacy, Pierce says. And that makes an odd sort of sense. When we respect others enough to defer to their wisdom or community standing, we earn a similar respect ourselves. It takes respect to get respect. Nothing is lost by bowing briefly to someone older, wiser, or more powerful than ourselves. Nothing is lost by taking the time to acknowledge status and earned respect. When we humble ourselves, we are then invited into a more intimate relationship. So intimate are those relationships that they survive even death. Though all my grandparents are long dead, I still call them Grandma and Grandpa. And when I say their names in a litany of my ancestors, it is these intimate titles that I give their names, therefore adding more power to that naming. I could call Howard and June Lyman, I could call Lauren and Mildred Dana, but I don't really know who these people are. They are just the funny names of my grandparents, names I would have only seen on letters addressed to them. They are only the names that their parents gave them, that they knew as children. The ongoing relationship with these dead relatives and so many more ancestors requires intimacy and respect. So what are we doing when we're calling our ancestors? Monotheistic religions have sometimes been uncomfortable with this pagan practice. Christianity in particular has been somewhat suspicious of ancestor worship, though it gives a nod to all of it at All Saints' Day and All Souls' Day. So what are we doing when we call our ancestors? I think we're doing something religiously complex. We are naming the sources of our strength, especially when that strength has been gained through hardship. We are locating ourselves in the world, even if we wish that location were somewhat different. By calling our ancestors, we are summoning the courage to live our lives with honesty and integrity. Through the saying of their names, we resolve to live well the days of our lives. Calling upon the ancestors is about memory, Yolanda Pierce says. Remembering how I am connected to a web of humanity that does not end when our bodies have returned to dust. I want to excavate these ancestral memories, to listen as voices speak to my heart across time and distance, to pay attention to the stories of people whose voices were silenced when they were alive. I feel the presence of these ancestors encouraging me to speak truth in places and spaces they were never allowed to enter. When Yolanda Pierce calls on her ancestors, she includes everyone in the African American diaspora caused by the transatlantic slave trade. Like many Black people, she can only trace her family tree back so far. After that, all stolen Africans are her family. Naming this fact, keeping the truth about that painful chapter in world history alive. It confirms that those caught in the horrific institution of slavery did not die in vain. The experience of our ancestors might be different than Pierce's, but no adult person gets to live a life free from pain. No adult person gets to live a life without causing pain either. And this is exactly the point. When we call our ancestors, we call them in the fullness of their humanity. We call their good qualities and we call their bad qualities. We call the health they created and we call the disease that they perpetuated. We call their noble acts and we call their cowardly ones too. These are not just names we are calling, rather they are full lives. And it is our sincere prayer that someday others will call our names with an equal measure of respect for the fullness of our lives. Wendell Berry says, "We clasp the hands of those that go before us and the hands of those that come after us. We enter the little circle of each other's arms and the larger circle of lovers whose hands are joined in a dance, and the larger circle of all creatures passing in and out of life who also move in a dance to a music so subtle and vast that no ear hears it except in fragments. By remembering our ancestors, we knit them to us again. We rekindle their memories so that their memories might give us courage. We call on them as whole people, flawed and noble, just as we are flawed and noble. We give thanks for their living while forgiving some of their choices. By remembering our ancestors, we remember ourselves into fuller being. So be it. Amen." I'd like you to pair up or talk. Pairs are going to be best for this next thing, this reflection question. What I'd like you to do is, if you are here at church in the sanctuary, pair up with someone and just take turns. Just name an ancestor and hear the other person name one. Name another one and another one and another one and another one. Just say something like, "My grandmother, June Lyman," or "Grandma Lyman," and then the next person will say a name. Online, you can just start typing those names in the chat, and you'll just see a long cascade of names of your ancestors. Let us take a couple of minutes and share the names of our ancestors with one another.
This is a time to listen to the breaths of our ancestors. This is a time to share what is on our hearts in prayer, in meditation. Each week, I invite you to share what is on your heart, and if you would like, Howard or I will share it aloud during the service so that you can be held in prayer and in care by this community. This week, I share that our beloved staff person, Anderson, our gospel choir leader, and so much more, is down in Florida. He's okay, but he's there because he lost his brother-in-law, Robert Lawrence. Robert died in surgery at the age of 47. And so Anderson is with his family. We hold him and especially his sister, who is Robert's widow, Clarelle, in our hearts and our prayers. Secondly, and sadly, last week I shared that Wendy W. was in the process of dying, and we learned that she did die last Sunday after having had a brain aneurysm. So we hold her husband, Mike, in our compassion and care, and I hold all of you who were close with Wendy and Mike when they were here at First Parish in my prayers and my care. Usually at this point, we would call aloud the names of folks who are on our hearts in our prayers. We're going to do that a little bit later in our prayer time this week. So I invite you to just keep settling in as we are led in spirit of life. You may hum if you would like.
Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me.
I invite you into a time of meditation where we will create a prayer of listening and a prayer of our voices together. You may want to close your eyes so that it is easier to listen, or you may wish just to soften your gaze a bit. Can you hear your own breath Just a little, can you feel it? That source of life and source of voice. Can you hear, listen to the echo of all the names we shared aloud and shared in the chat, all of the names of our ancestors. Whoosh. Listen to the breaths of our ancestors lingering with us still. Our parents and grandparents, family from generations ago, aunts, uncles, other family, cousins, role models and mentors, friends, so many who have joined the ancestors. Who are your ancestors? Let us call their names once again, creating that breath, that circle of prayer here in this sanctuary and beyond our walls. What are their names? Betty, John, Eileen, Larry, Katie, Dennis. Keeping those names coming, listening in your heart for their breath, listening for the lessons that they taught us, the memories that come. What are their voices telling you? If there is a phrase or a sentence of what their voices tell you, I invite you to call that aloud into this space, that we may hear their breaths collectively within and beyond our walls. Making paper dolls instead of cutting my hair. Love. Integrity. Justice. Whoosh. These lessons, these ancestors are with us. Let us listen to their breaths. Let us join our breaths with theirs. Who would you like to hold up in prayer today? Who is on your heart that we might hold each other and our community in prayer together? I invite you to call aloud the names of those who we should hold in prayer and in care right now, within and beyond these walls. Anderson, Clarell, Mike W. And finally, what are the prayers on your hearts? The prayers for our wider world. I invite you to call aloud in this space and beyond these walls, that we may make a circle of wider prayer together. Prayer for justice after the Kyle Rittenberg trial. A prayer for the softening of our hearts. A prayer for all of us to be held in love. Let us sit together, lingering and listening for a moment longer. And as we are led and find a stillness, I invite you to keep listening, to join your voice in humming, or simply to stay quiet and listening in your heart.
Find a stillness, hold a stillness, let the stillness carry me. Find a silence, hold the silence, let the silence carry me. In the Spirit, by the Spirit, with the Spirit giving power, I will find true harmony.
I'd like to invite David Ropeek to come up and light the social action candle. Come on up, David.
May I? Before you light the candle, I'm going to squeeze another comment in besides the social action candle comments. I can't tell you how, I guess, where's the camera, how touched I am to physically be back with all of you. It's got so many layers to being here physically. The creak of the pews and the clunk of the floor and the hollowness of the choir's sound in the room, and that's where I sat with Wendy, and I can't commend enough the power of being in community that being here physically has touched me with. So, thank you. We privileged people usually give our money as individuals and a community to causes we believe in and organizations who are doing that work, but the actual people who receive that money and that benefit remain anonymous to us mostly. Not so with Kiva, who I'm here to talk to you about this morning. Kiva represents a network of small microfinancers around the world who give tiny little loans to poor people who wouldn't get them from banks, too tiny for banks to give them. The microfinancers on the ground in those places give part of the money, and Kiva gives the rest, which it collects from us by posting all of those loan requests online. And each request has what the person wants, how much, what they're going to use it for, a little description of them as a person, and a picture of them. Picture of them. Let me emphasize that, a picture of them. This personal giving, a level of giving, is powerfully emotional, more than abstract when you just write a check. But it's hard for those of us who are part of this program and help distribute these funds, because the needs of each person are poignant, and you connect to that poignancy. Women need help building toilets for their families, getting clothing for their kids so they can go to school, $500 to start a small business. And as you scroll through the list of requests, their humanity and their need touches your heart, and we have only so much money, and we can give to some and not to others. And that's both rewarding and hard. So we keep our gifts small, $25 to $50, depending on what the person needs. Usually it doesn't complete the loan, but it builds towards that completion. We voluntarily give a tiny slice to Kiva so that they can do all of this, usually about less than 1%, which helps Kiva ensure that they're dealing with microfinancers who see to it that the loans are repaid, and they are mostly repaid. We give only several loans per round of giving, but over the years that this program's been underway, we've given hundreds of them because we get the money back and we can keep giving. So don't think of this share the plate money that you're being asked to share this morning as just helping Kiva, an organization. I ask you to have those real people's faces and lives in your minds and your hearts as you share what you can afford to share. Thank you.
Thank you, David. We decided at staff meeting on Tuesday that the science was there, that we could pass the plates. So welcome back, ushers, with your plates. So, as the plates come through, I invite you to give generously to the good work of Kiva and First Parish in Concord. An offering for the good work and witness of both will now be gratefully received. If you're in the balcony, there's a little box. You can just start going it, pass it from hand to hand, down from each side, and then somebody on the end just bring it down to the ushers.
As we come towards the end of our service, I want to invite you to stick around. We have, if you are feeling a little bit in a quieter space, want to continue reflecting on the themes of the service, we have the worship sharing circle. That is for you whether you're online or here in person or want to hop over if you're nearby. If you're online, the link will be in the chat later. If you're here in person, we will be meeting over in the Ripley room that way. Kel Kelleher is leading the circle today. If you would like to come to coffee hour, coming on down from down the road or from here in person, it will be out to your left on the terrace and labyrinth. Please mask when you can't distance. There at coffee hour, we have folks who are here to help you connect. At the welcome table hosted by the Congregational Life Committee, you will find Sarah Ballard and Jeff Brainerd. At the nearby, you'll have your standing committee rep. The standing committee is our board here at First Parish. Mike Beer is here as a rep from the standing committee today. Along with the welcome table, you can find out information about our welcome, re-welcome class. That starts today. You might want to come, it's online, but you might want to come if you have been new to First Parish either recently or in the past few years. Perhaps you're a pandemic parishioner and wondering, now that we are doing multi-platform worship and life, what is this congregation all about? Come on to our welcome, re-welcome class. If you have been away for a while and you're looking to reconnect, come to the Welcome Re-Welcome class. It starts today, this afternoon. You can find the link in FP Weekly. And if you don't get FP Weekly, you should. You can sign up on our website. It's got the links to everything that's happening at church, everything at Zoom, and everything in person. If you have not signed up for FP Weekly or you're not getting it and you think you should, but either way you don't have access to that welcome, re-welcome link, but you want to come to the class, if you're in person, just raise your hand and the ushers can bring you a little card that I printed that has the link on it. Is there anyone who's kind of stuck in that middle ground position? Well, that's great. I hope that's because you've all signed up for FP Weekly. All right, the final things I'll tell you about is that at coffee hour, we also have ways that you can make a difference. We have the Immigrant Justice Task Force table, I believe, is still out there, and even if it's not, you should know the big news that we are welcoming an Afghan family this week. Their plane is slated to arrive any hour now, or at least to depart any hour now. They are imminently arriving. There's also the table with cards for folks who are on our pastoral list. If you would like to send a card to Anderson or to Mike or to anyone from the last few weeks, you can do that there. I also saw a table with some scarves or something, and that's all the information I've got on that, but they were very colorful, so you'll have to discover that yourselves. Let's sing together now. Our closing hymn is in your gray hymnal, number 32. Now thank we all our God. Please rise in body, rise in spirit.
As you gather around a Thanksgiving table later this week, remember that your ancestors are there as well. Speak their names. Ask of the other folks there, who are their ancestors? Remember, we did not come from nothing. We came from people with hopes and dreams, with peace in their heart, with justice in their hands, and with love in their eyes. May this be around your Thanksgiving table too. Please join in the first parish benediction saying, "Go out into the world in peace, have courage, hold on to what is good, return to no one evil for evil, strengthen the faint-hearted, support the weak, help the suffering, honor all beings." Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. Join us outside.